Hey everyone, welcome back to DemDMs. My name is Matt.
And I'm Panda Ghost.
And today we're going to be reviewing one of our favorite tools that we own, both of us, which is the Game Master's Book of Random Encounters. Yes, hold it up so the people can see. By Jeff Ashworth and a number of other people. But we're going to talk about this one today. I think this is the first of their series of books. They have a litany of them out at this point. I think they're up to like 6 or 7, maybe.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it's something crazy. I have all of them. I just don't know how many I have. So that's a bit of a problem. But anyway, so today we're kind of just going to go through, our review of it. Do we think it's useful? Is it something that you as a DM should purchase and use in your games, and kind of go through, what all is in the book and what you can expect to get out of it, right? Now, Panda, you and I think have had this one for a while, so we have had a chance to use it in our games,
yes,
in various ways. So, do you want to, because your game that's currently going on actually has used some of the stuff from this book, so let's start maybe there.
So I actually haven't used any of the encounters yet from here. Sure. I am actually, I'm planning on it. One of the problems that I have with this book is only because of my because of the setting that I've been writing myself. Mm-hmm. Some of these encounters, they're a little too generic fantasy.
Sure.
You might be dealing with more mystical beings and such like that, which doesn't, my world is more of a Tolkien-esque world, keeping more to like the humans, the elves, and like halflings and stuff like that.
But I think they kind of get a little out there, maybe, is what you're saying.
Right, they get a little out there, but like if you're doing any kind of like adventure that takes place in
like high fantasy
Faerun, or
Critical Role, Exandria,
Exandria, right? Like you did. Mm-hmm. I know you used some of these in your Tal'Dorei game.
I was paging through. I used a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, I remember this. Oh, I remember this.
Yeah.
I think you used almost every inn that is in this book.
Yeah, well, when you're creating a first to 20th level adventure, you take all the help you can get.
Yeah, right.
Like when your characters are like, is there a tavern here? You're like, sure there is. Of course. Why wouldn't there be?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I like about this is while there is, obviously page through the book, find the things that you like.
Right.
Do what you want with them. It does also give you some like randomization options if you feel like, you don't really need to, set down on one thing, but you kind of just want something to pick up in the minute.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite things about this book is, yes, you have run some of the stuff from this book, and I don't feel as bad about running the same things that you've run because there are random options for each
thing.
Yeah, each thing, right? So like variant encounters for this this Hall of the Many Gods, right? You roll a d6, and if you roll 1, here's a heated exchange between followers of desperate gods that has come to blows, right? Or they might run into bandits, or there might be goblins riding wargs or something. You know what I mean? Like every time it's run, it can be different, right?
Gives you some replayability to it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, 100% agree. I mean, one of the things that I loved about this was, obviously it's even said in the book, like, this is a rough outline of what's going on here.
Right.
Change things, make it your own, do what you need to, but it has enough to, like, if you need to pick something up real quick, you can do it, right?
Yeah.
And that it's typical of a lot of like random encounter tools that are out there. But what I like about this, and we're going to kind of go through kind of the table of contents a little bit, I guess, of what all is in here, is you have it kind of broken down by like environment, which is nice, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not random encounters in the way that we know them of like you go run into 1d12 goblins.
Right.
It's here's a cool location,
Mm-hmm.
right, that you can go to and maybe something that's happening there,
Right.
right?
Right.
It gives you a like list of one-shot adventures, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you want to play just one quick night evening, you don't have anything to run, right? You have these and you can kind of just go through the
Yeah.
adventure.
I mean, I will
um,
say if you are gonna run them, read them beforehand. Like
yes, of
it's not
course.
like a, oh, you're in the middle of a session, it's like, oh, let's do a one shot. Like you'll still want to read ahead. Like I
Hmm.
know the one that involves a carnival. You definitely want to read ahead on that one. And
Yeah.
there's one where you're doing like some espionage stuff or something like that. I forget exactly what. Um,
Yeah.
but those like the one shot adventures you definitely want to read ahead of time. Where the other things you can kind of use on the fly.
Yeah.
But I will say that kind of leads me to, so one of the great things about this, right, is that
Hmm.
the book comes with these nice detailed, right, maps. My only
Hmm.
complaint about the fact that it comes with these nice detailed maps is that there's no PDF, or as far as
Like
I,
online code or something.
right. So like if I want to run these maps, cool, but I'm just gonna have to draw them out on a battle mat, right? So
Yeah.
what's kind of like, yeah, it's cool for the DM to see these neat, intricate maps, but
Hmm.
you know, I like, and again, you might not even be a group that runs gridded combat. You might do all theater of the
Sure.
mind or something else. But if it would be nice to have the option to use the maps that are provided. If they were like a PDF that you could print out to scale and just
Hmm.
throw it down on the table, right? Like
Yeah.
that would
Or
be
like some
awesome.
sort of like online VTT,
Yeah, right.
access there. 100% agree. What the kind of going through here, right? I mean, it starts off, it goes through the, 8 one-shot
Yep.
adventures. They go, up in level as you go, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Generally with ranges of like 2 to 3 or 4 level spans. So obviously, if you wanted to incorporate this game, if it was something that fit with your story or your world,
Mm-hmm.
you definitely could. I never really found a case to run them in my game, which doesn't mean you can't.
Right.
I'm just saying, like, in the course of the story that I was already telling, it didn't really come.
Right.
It wouldn't have really worked with what I was doing. Because when I was using this was for primarily during the uh, Exandria campaign that I ran.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did like was there were a bunch of unique magic
Yep.
items that were interesting. I know some of them have made it into your game as
Yes, they
well.
have. The
Hmm.
fact that they do use a range of levels for
Hmm.
the one shots. At least the way I'm interpreting the book is that it's not, if it says levels 1 to 5, it's not you're going from level 1 to 5. It is of
Correct.
a challenge rating for parties level 1 to 5, which
Yeah.
is nice that you can kind of slot that in anywhere you want into, like if you are slotting it into a campaign,
Hmm.
you can just slot it in like, oh, okay, you guys didn't reach it yet, whatever. It comes up, a
Yeah.
couple levels later, and it doesn't really matter, right? Because it's a range of levels. Um,
Yeah, and I think it really works with a game like yours, which is very
yeah.
exploration based, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you could come into these at any point,
Yes.
really, as long as it obviously again if it fits with the world. But with like the variant encounters and stuff like that in there as well, because they have that as part of the one shots, as well. And that allows you to scale the adventure up or make it a little
Mm-hmm.
bit harder if you feel like, maybe it's not challenging enough for your players if you have more players than are expected or whatever. Right, which is typical of most one-shot things. I liken this. I mean, a close comparison has to be, the Yawning Portal, Tales from the Yawning Portal, and those anthology books that are meant to be, a standalone one-shot adventure, or run together as a campaign. I don't think any of these in this book are meant to be run connectively. I'm sure you can, but
Mm-hmm.
they're not meant to. Um, and they do have like very different themes, like you said. One is kind of experiencing, the wacky goings on at a carnival, where like later on it deals with like breaking into a prison, to get like a murderer out of jail or something like that. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's very disconnected. So I think it would be considered one shots, which is what they're advertised for. So that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, and uh, what I like about these one shots as well is like within them there is magic items. I do wish that there was, similar to like WotC published content and stuff like that. I do wish that they did not have the magic items in the adventure. I wish they had them like as like a separate appendix, maybe, so
Mm-hmm.
you could more easily find them and go through them.
Yeah, like
Um,
if you notice that my book has a lot of tags. These are actually all tags for the different magic items that I've given out to the party over the course of my campaign, and because they're not all in the same place, I have to just mark, which whatever. Like, I don't care about having
yeah,
stuff. Like, if you care about having stuff sticking out of your books and that's gonna drive you nuts, um, yeah, that might be a problem. Um,
yeah. But I think that's about all I want to talk about with the one shots, unless you had anything else that
nope,
you wanted to
that's
add there.
pretty much it.
Okay. So yeah, moving on to the next few sections, which I think we can kind of um, sum up, because they're similar, it's just different locales.
Yeah, well, I think the next section is what, the taverns.
Yeah, taverns, inns, shops, and guild halls. Some of the best parts of this are like, the unique taverns, that have a
Mm-hmm.
unique flair to them, right? And it's something that I don't need to come up with. I can just page through and be like, "Ooh, that sounds cool." It kind of makes sense that this would be here. And if you look through the tavern section, you will notice that at least three or four of them were in my game
Yeah, I
at
mean, the
different
very
points.
first tavern we ran into was the Two Door Tavern or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
and that it was good because it's a nice like little
yeah.
roadside tavern. It gives you some exciting, stuff to do in there with
Mm-hmm.
like these unique like challenge games and things like that, of like strength and like bar games and stuff like that to play with the players.
Yeah.
And that was neat. And it does give you some like ideas of like you could, make your own stuff as well in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like you have one that's a bar that is kind of like a rundown restaurant almost, and then you go to down to the basement and it's a thief's den. And
Yep.
further in you can make it. There's an option to make it into a assassin's guild, which is actually again one of the ones I ran,
Yep.
and turned into a very interesting encounter, in one of the cities.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I think what I like about these is these feel a lot more portable, if that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yes, they do.
Um, just because they're not really setting dependent. And it
Right.
is
Right.
very much like take it or leave it kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
I
So
would
I
say
would,
that this section is the most portable for
sure.
different adventures. Um,
Yeah, and like what I like is that it does give you different, things to do, like the Two Doors Tavern that we talked about before. It gives you games to play with your companions.
mhm.
Then it gives you uh different, how packed the tavern is as a random roll and different things like that.
Right.
Which, as you get into further of these books, we'll talk more about it, but they do kind of expand upon these random tables, for you to roll upon as you get more and more of these books. So it does kind of fill in some of the gaps that are left by this book, I would say. Um,
Hmm.
so I could definitely see a lot of people like going for multiple uh, books in this series, but um, focusing on this book again. Um, but one thing that did stay in as part of the game, and I don't know if you picked up on this, but the Caravan
Oh
Bazaar
yeah, the caravan. Yeah.
was a I created this kind of not necessarily interdimensional traveling caravan, but this like traveling caravan that like just appeared at random spots around the
Right.
world whenever the players would like go somewhere. Like they were going down the road at the very beginning of the game, and they got to meet all of them. Then randomly it was in the middle of the Underdark the one day. You know what I mean? Like it was just
Oh yeah. That's true.
it kind of just was like, why is this here? You know, and that was fun to do. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those NPCs became, very close to the players, I
Yes, very
think, because
beloved.
they came in more
Right.
often. Going further into this book, there's a whole magic shop that has a litany of magic items. Again, some of which you've used in your
Yep.
games. I've used a couple of them. I would say the only thing I was hesitant with this book, and its magic items was I think at some time the magic items came off as a little bit overpowered at times.
Yeah, they're kind of powerful, especially for their price.
Yeah,
And
the
like,
rarity I think is probably if it was a higher rarity for some of these, I wouldn't have as big of a problem with them as
yeah.
I do. But like there's a knife in there that
Oh,
it doesn't just it's not just a +1 knife. It also increases the damage die of the knife to a D8 instead of a D4. And then on top of that, once per long rest, you can say a command and it does an extra 3d6 slashing damage and an extra 1d6 fire damage.
for its rarity,
Yeah,
it's
which is
pretty powerful.
uncommon, by the way.
Yeah, it's definitely I would say the power of a rare magic item, not
Hmm.
a I mean, the fact that it's a +1 in the first place,
Yeah.
that is one thing that you do have to be cognizant of, is make sure to tweak things to
Hmm.
match your,
The power level.
yeah, the
Yeah,
power
and
levels.
it does say there are some kind of guidelines in the beginning of the book that kind of goes into that as well. But yeah, definitely just gotta be mindful of it more than anything. Um, Next section in the book is temples, tomes, and crypts. I
You mean
think this is
tombs?
probably. Oh, what did I say?
Tomes.
Tomes? Well, whatever. Tombs, tomes.
um yeah,
I I definitely don't. I think this is probably the section that I used the least.
yeah,
But that's mainly because our group wasn't very devout.
right.
Aside from like a certain character, and so like it didn't come up.
Right.
I think you could definitely run these, and very similar uh, to the taverns, they could be very portable into your games. For me, I didn't get a chance to use them.
If you're going into a dungeon, typically it's going to be a larger, longer dungeon than just like a, oh,
Hmm.
pop in, pop out kind of thing. Now, if you are
Sure.
doing, the dungeons, if you are doing a pop in, pop out kind of dungeon adventure kind of thing, it works.
I mean, like, I think what you have to realize is, I mean, there are options for encounters in these areas, but I think for at least for those, it's not required. It's mainly like locations to throw into your world.
Right, right,
Um, so like, don't be expecting to like have serious fights. There are maps for all of these places,
right,
so you
exactly.
could have a fight in them. It's just not, I think, the intended use. Um,
Yeah.
but again, not much to say with that section. Moving on quickly here, the Great Outdoors is the next section. This
Y-
one, I think, is by far the most useful.
yes.
Um,
Yep.
just
100%.
just because, I mean, just the nature of being outside, you can incorporate these into any location you want. Um, I do think that uh, one thing that I wish was that maybe these maps were in color at times
That
because
would be
it's
nice.
the black and white sometimes is a little bit hard to read.
Yeah.
It does give you some descriptions, but it's not the best. Also, I think one thing that I've been noticing, and maybe you noticed different, I haven't really noticed a lot of read aloud text for these
Um,
areas.
I mean, I know some of them, like the one that I just flipped to, does have read aloud text. But yeah, I don't think all of them. Some of them might. Most of them might.
I feel like if you added some like read aloud text for the players or for the DM to read, you could enhance these
Mm-hmm.
locations just a little bit more.
Yep.
But it's not necessarily needed because again, I don't think these are all requiring encounters either. They're a
Yeah.
little bit more likely to have encounters at them, but
Yeah, I mean,
uh,
this is the section where I really was like, oh man, I really wish I had a PDF of this map, right?
yeah.
Because like a lot of them are like fighting bandits or goblins or things of that nature. It's just like, oh,
Mhm.
it'd be really nice if I had a printable uh, PDF of these maps,
Sure.
right?
I mean, even if like even if you had some sort of just like QR code, hey, go over here, you can get these as PDFs
Yep.
or something like that would be, I mean, because then you're still paying
Right.
for it, I guess.
Right.
And that's probably the main reason. I mean, these are artists that they hired to do these maps. I would, I'm glad that they're at least probably receiving some of the commission for this. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, but anyway, yeah, I mean, again, cool locations. They have some like treetop villages and beach front areas and things like that. Um, the last one, which I think is probably the most useful for like encounter uh, areas, is your homes, hideouts, labs, and lairs. Um, I used one of these for my game early on. It was the
Was it the
uh,
turtle?
no, it was the
Oh.
location for the cult of Orcus that you
Oh.
guys
Right.
fought right
Yes. Yes.
early on. Um, at least for inspiration. I don't necessarily know if I 100% ported over, but like the idea of the space I used, and that's really what I like about these is that they give you inspiration, right? Is like it's just another nice piece of tool utility for it, as well as like they give you variant locations at times. Like you have, variant home one, variant home two, that just different locations that you can kind of swap in and out as you go, and then you get into like they have a section where you can create your own castle at random by rolling on random rooms and stuff like that. And the maps just kind of cut off at that room, so you can just kind of piece them together a little bit as a map. I think this would be really good for someone who wants to have a full like castle-sized dungeon, but doesn't necessarily know how to go about populating the space of like what would actually be there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think this really works for that and gives you a lot of like utility with it. Anything else in this section?
You did mention about read aloud text. There is more read aloud text in this section,
Okay, gotcha. Which
especially
makes sense because
more in the hideouts area
yeah,
of this
which makes sense with the idea that it's probably going to be more used for
combat. Right.
encounters and combats. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you're ready to move on,
Yep.
um, next section, rooftops, alleyways, and tunnels. Again, more locations this time, probably going to be useful in like an urban encounter. Obviously, where you're maybe having a chase sequence or bandits in an alleyway or something like that, right? And again, useful. Again, similarly to what you said, would be great if you had these maps available to you as PDF
Yeah.
forms, because just putting this down is a lot easier than drawing the 10 buildings that are on the map and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. When you get into the rooftops, alleyways, and tunnels area, there is a urban adventures variant encounters, which is neat to see that you can kind of roll and piece together, as well as like different laws and customs that are in the town and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
It just gives you some nice utility for your city. We're kind of breezing through them, but they're very
Yeah.
similar in their
Right. Yeah.
what you can do with them.
Every section is pretty much similar, just themed differently
Yeah,
and the like. Right. Which is
yeah,
good. Like don't get me wrong. Like that might sound like a negative, but it's not a negative. It's a good thing.
yeah.
Um.
And the sheer amount of that is like I would say 80% of the book, which is what you want. You want that more than you want one-shot adventures or something like that might not.
Right.
The last section is the random NPC randomized tables section, which starts off with a random NPC generator. I used this so often it's not even funny.
Yeah.
What I love about this is it's not just, okay, is it a, dwarf named Holga? You know what I mean? Like it goes
Right.
through, you can do the race of the creature, you can do their gender identity, their age, their intelligence, the hair, the build, and then beyond that, you can get even further into using like a D100 table, their first name, their last name, a brief description of what they look like, their wants and needs, like what are they, after, secrets or obstacles, so like things that they're like a bond or a flaw, right? In fifth edition, and then also carrying so nice little like loot table that's not just all coins, and this I used quite frequently, and kind of actually filled in several like bar keeps and things like that I came into contact with. And now what I would do is I would generally roll these um, beforehand, make sure that they work. Obviously, when you're dealing with randomized tables, sometimes they don't all mesh together perfectly. Um, but I would like, find, roll until I get something that I like and then write that down, right? I don't necessarily think I would use this as a in the moment, gotta come up with a character, NPC build, maybe for the name, but not necessarily for the full NPC, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I could see using it maybe for the first three columns, like the brief description of what they look like, right?
Mhm.
But they do give character to your characters.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, like it's better than the generic gray, shopkeep that you always have that's
right,
named
exactly.
Philip. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
you want to get some variance there. I kind of matched this with I think it was in the Xanathar's Guide to Everything. There's like a similar
Oh
random
yeah.
name generator, but it's in the back of the book and it kind of goes by D&D race and then also like Earth regions and nationalities as well. So I
Mm-hmm.
would kind of mash those two charts together if I wasn't getting something I liked.
Right.
Because like some of these, I mean, there's a, Vivian in this. There's a Piper. You know what I mean? Like some of them aren't like what I would consider like super high fantasy names all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So like sometimes it just you want something a little bit more uh exotic, and
Mm-hmm.
you kind of need to get out of that.
But still a good
Yeah.
table. Um,
I would
honestly, if I could have this as like again going back to the whole PDF thing, like
mm,
if
printable for your DM screen or
yeah,
something.
it would be great if this was like yeah, if I could have this in my DM screen, instead of just
Hmm.
having the whole book, because like, well, I'll save that thought for final remarks, but yeah, it'd be nice to have this table within the
I
DM screen.
I will say if I had to choose this or the Xanathar's Guide to Everything, um, for just the random tables, I would choose this book over,
Mm,
because it goes a little bit more in depth to the NPC. Um, Obviously, Xanathar's Guide has a lot of other things in it, so it's kind of hard to compare the books. But in terms of just the NPC generation, I greatly appreciate that they went a little bit more than just the name, which is kind of typical. Um, but then, the next section, of the randomized tables, it gets into random tavern generator, for
yes.
different types of names
And
of
I really need to remember to utilize this more because every time you guys go into a city, I'm like,
mhm. Yeah, and what I like is like even beyond the name, the next couple of tables here goes into a description of the place that is randomly
right.
generated, right? Then the next page over is a random curse creator, where
Yeah,
you
I would
can.
be careful with this one though.
Yeah,
I'd
I
be
feel like
careful
some of
with
them are a
this
little
one.
bit little bit crazy. But it helps kind of look just with a quick roll, right? Now, what I will say is if you're looking for randomized tables like this that are not just character names, I don't necessarily know if I would purchase this book. I would
Right.
purchase one of their later books that they just recently came out with, because it's filled with these types of randomized tables. Um, but having these at the back of this book, still gives you something while also giving you the random encounters, um, which that other book does not give you. Um, but then, yeah, so you have the random curse generator creator, then you have the party makeup maker,
Yeah,
which is an
and
interesting name.
yeah, and this is an interesting table to me
Hmm.
because at least for the way that our group has and maybe it is worth, heavily suggesting, party members have a connection before the campaign, right? Like
Yeah. I
like
mean
this
that
is
so just to emphasize that that's what this is for. This is for
right.
giving your players a baked in connection to one of the other players'
Right.
characters or an NPC that is, traveling with the party or something like that. Um Again, giving it's randomized. There's two columns. You roll for both of them and you kind of come up with something to work with. Like for instance, you have their cousins that misplace their identity, that with little respect for authority, or they love a good prank, or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and I like this as like a inspiration thing for the players. I don't necessarily know if I would ever say, "Hey guys, I'm gonna make you roll on this thing. Um, Decide who you want to be partners with, and then roll on this." I don't necessarily know if I would do that because I don't want to force people to
Right.
have connections. But I
But
would
almost
definitely like if people were like, "Hey, I kind of want to be connected to Panda's character.
mhm.
What can we do there? Like, what makes sense for your world?" And I'll be like, "Well, you know, maybe let's roll on this just to see what comes up and kind of give us some inspiration and see
Mhm.
if we feel it or if we don't feel it. You know."
Yeah. Exactly. And honestly, like I will say, as a dungeon master, and I would like to know if you guys struggle with this as well,
Hmm.
with parties of hyper individualistic people like our group is. If you guys struggle with having your parties coherent or sharing a backstory, because like honestly, one of the problems I'm running in with my campaign is like I have no idea how to keep you guys together,
Like
right?
have those bonds
Right.
organically form, and if they don't, what do you do, right? 100% agree. I think,
And this table is a good way to remedy that if you can
yeah,
convince your party to use this, right?
yeah. I mean, like everybody knows the typical trope of like starting a new adventure. During a session zero, you're like, does your party know each other? Do some of you know each other, right? And I think this is a good tool to have with you at that step,
Mm-hmm.
to see like what kind of connections you can make, as well as like even I would go so far as to say if your one of your players is like, I don't necessarily want to be connected to one of the party members, but I want an NPC that I'm connected to, and I don't really know, like I don't want to do the parent NPC because you're probably going to kill him, you know what I mean, and give you another option,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so just kind of having that is good, and I think it also could help fill out your own backstory,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Of like different people that you're connected to. Use that in the random name generator and the, with the descriptions and everything, and just kind of flush that out a little bit, right?
Yep.
And I definitely think that could definitely be useful for it. We didn't mention the price for this book. It's 22.99 US, or it
Yes,
was.
something like that.
You probably get it a little bit cheaper on Amazon if you wanted to. But I anytime these books come out, I'm instantly gonna buy it.
Yep.
I think as soon as I bought the last one, another one was announced. Like they're coming out with them pretty
Mm-hmm.
quickly.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't think the quality's been suffering, for anybody that's concerned. I think they've been keeping up with what they're intending, which is to give you just more utility and more
Yes.
tools.
Yep.
And I think it's great. I think they did a really good job.
Yeah, I will say if you are on a budget, and you know, something with random tables like this is something of interest to you, I would say that this one is probably your best bet to get. I mean, they're all great, but I would say this is probably your best bet.
We do have a lot of these to get through.
Yes.
So we're gonna take our time and do our due diligence, make sure that we're not recommending something if it's not fully what we want to do. As well as I feel like this is probably the book that we have the most familiarity with,
Yes.
just because of its like length of since release.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, if you guys want to see this, let us know down in the comment section. If you want us to review, other ones, if you know of them, if you have like your own favorite one, if you have an random encounter from this book that you really like, or something like that, be great to know. Any other final thoughts on the book, Panda, that you want to go over before we head out here?
I mean, yeah. If you do get this book, which I do recommend you get this book, obviously it is, it is a large, I mean, not large as in, pages wide, but I mean, like, it's the size of like a player's handbook, right? You might struggle to find space on your table, on your at the play table, right?
Sure.
So I would recommend, not necessarily using this at the play table if you, but it's definitely a good
Prep
for your
tool.
session prep, right?
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need to have it at the table. I mean, it does help to have it at the table if you need to reference something, but you don't need to have it at the table if you do your prep good enough. But I think that's it for me.
All right. I mean, last thing for me, just having run a decent portion of this book, in my games, I think we got to give all credit to the team behind these books. They did a really fabulous job, like I said before. Here at DemDMs, we're all about supporting third-party, content people. Just because the more people know about these products, and the more people know about these individuals that are trying to make the game more playable, the better. So, make sure you go out and if you feel like this is the right buy for you, please don't hesitate to buy it. Definitely worth it for us. So, can't recommend it enough. All right. Well, if you guys want to stay tuned, we will be coming out with the other books, as Panda has said, at some point here along the way, as well as some other awesome content coming down the pipeline. So be sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe, and sneak attack the notification bell. And stay tuned for next time when we slide into DemDMs. All right, guys. Bye.
Bye.